The year was 2347, and humanity had finally reached the stars. After centuries of dreaming, humans had joined the Galactic Concord. This was a group of 34 alien species who had been traveling through space for thousands of years. They watched humans with mild interest, the way a person might watch an ant carrying a crumb. To the ancient races of the galaxy, humans were nothing special. They lived short lives. They had no mental powers. Their technology was basic. They were emotional creatures who fought among themselves over small things. The Concord allowed humans to join only because it was easier than refusing. Nobody saw them as a threat. Nobody saw them as anything at all. But humans did not care what others thought. They built and dreamed and reached further into the darkness between stars. Their greatest achievement was a colony called New Eden, built on a beautiful world far from Earth. 12 million people lived there. Farmers grew crops under an alien sun. Children played in parks surrounded by flowers that existed nowhere else. Scientists studied the mysteries of the universe. Artists painted sunsets that had 2 moons. It was everything humanity had ever hoped to become. The Dominion watched New Eden with cold eyes. They were an ancient race of reptilian creatures who had ruled their corner of the galaxy for 10,000 years. They had conquered dozens of species. They had grown bored of peace and tired of being ignored by younger races who no longer feared them. Humanity's growth annoyed them. These soft, pink creatures were expanding too fast, talking too loud, dreaming too big. They decided to teach the galaxy a lesson. They would remind everyone what true power looked like, and they would use humanity to send that message. The attack came on a morning when the children of New Eden were walking to school. There was no warning, no declaration of war, no demands. The fleet simply appeared in the sky like a swarm of black insects. 300 warships against a colony that had no military, no weapons, no way to fight back. Commander Al of the watched from his flagship and smiled. He ordered his communications officer to broadcast everything to the entire galaxy. Every species would see what happened to the weak. Every species would remember their place. The bombardment began at sunrise and did not stop until sunset. Plasma fire rained from the sky. Buildings that had taken years to build collapsed in seconds. The beautiful parks became fields of ash. The schools became tombs. People ran through the streets screaming, searching for their families, but there was nowhere to run. The had surrounded the planet. They hunted down escaped ships and destroyed them one by one. They sent ground troops to chase survivors through the ruins, laughing as they killed. 12 million humans lived on New Eden when the sun rose that morning. When the sun set, none remained. The galaxy watched in silence. Some species were horrified, most simply looked away. A few quietly approved. Humans had been getting too confident, they whispered. Perhaps this would put them back in their proper place. The Galactic Concord issued a statement expressing concern but did nothing else. This was how the universe worked. The strong took what they wanted. The weak suffered and died. It had always been this way. On Earth, people gathered around screens and watched their brothers and sisters die. They saw the fires and heard the screams. They watched soldiers pose for pictures beside piles of human bodies. They listened to Commander Al give a speech about the natural order of things, about how humans should be grateful for this lesson. In a small apartment in a city called Tokyo, a woman named watched her daughter die. Her daughter was 7 years old. Her name was. She had gone to New Eden with her father to visit her grandmother. In the final broadcast from the surface, saw running through a burning street, holding the stuffed bear she had owned since she was a baby. Was crying and asking why the sky was on fire. Then the screen went dark. Did not scream. She did not cry. She sat very still for a long time. Something inside her changed. Something old and dark and patient opened its eyes. Across the world, in billions of hearts, the same thing happened. A door that had been locked for centuries swung open. Humans had always been fighters. They had crawled out of caves and conquered their world. They had survived ice ages and plagues and wars that nearly destroyed them. They had split the atom and walked on their moon and refused to die no matter what the universe threw at them. But they had also learned to be peaceful. They had buried their rage beneath civilization and progress and hope. They had just dug it up. In the halls of power, leaders who had never agreed on anything looked at each other and saw the same terrible understanding. There would be no diplomacy. There would be no negotiation. There would be no measured response. The old beast that lived in humanity's heart was awake now, and it was hungry. The alien races of the galaxy expected humans to grieve. They expected desperate messages begging for help. They expected surrender and acceptance. What they got was something else entirely. In the weeks that followed the massacre, Earth fell silent. Human ships returned home. Embassies closed their doors. Communication stopped. To the watching galaxy, it looked like humanity had broken, had retreated to die quietly in their little corner of space. Thus celebrated their victory. They declared humans properly humbled and began planning their next conquest. They had no idea what was coming. Nobody did. Behind the silence, behind the closed doors and dark windows, humanity was preparing, not for survival, not for defense, for revenge. 3 months passed after the massacre of New Eden. The galaxy moved on. News channels stopped talking about the dead humans. Other species made jokes about how quickly the loud little creatures had gone quiet. The Dominion received praise from some corners of space for putting humanity in its place. Commander Al became famous. He gave interviews where he laughed about how easy it had been, how the humans had cried and begged before they died. Nobody knew what was happening on Earth. Nobody thought to ask. Behind the silence, something had changed. Something that had never happened before in human history. On the 3rd day after the massacre, every government on Earth received the same message. It came from nowhere and everywhere at once. It said simply, "Enough. We speak with one voice now, or we die alone." Within a week, something impossible occurred. Every nation on Earth agreed to dissolve. There were no wars, no arguments, no debates. Presidents and kings and prime ministers simply walked away from their old roles and joined together under a single banner. The United Terran Sovereignty was born in 7 days. For the first time since humans had climbed down from trees, they were truly united. Every factory on Earth shifted to a single purpose. Every laboratory received the same orders. Every resource in the solar system was gathered and directed toward one goal. Scientists who had spent their lives on peaceful research were given new jobs. Engineers who built cars now built weapons. Teachers became logistics officers. Artists designed propaganda. Everyone had a role. Everyone agreed. There were no protests. There were no objections. 12 million dead had bought complete unity. In a bunker beneath the mountains of Switzerland, the greatest military minds humanity had ever produced gathered around a single table. Generals and admirals who had studied war their entire lives sat beside historians who knew every battle ever fought. They did not plan a defense. They did not plan a counterattack. They planned something much simpler. They planned an extinction. "We do not stop until they are gone," said General Wei, a woman whose calm voice hid a fury that could burn stars. Not defeated, not surrendered, gone, every ship, every weapon, every ability to ever threaten us again. No one disagreed. In laboratories around the world, scientists worked without sleep. They pulled out projects that had been locked away for decades, weapons too terrible to ever use, technologies too dangerous to reveal. Humanity had always held back. They had always chosen peace when war was possible. They had hidden their true capabilities because they feared what they might become if they ever let go. Now they let go. Dr. Sarah led a team that had spent 20 years studying something called fold space technology. It was supposed to be impossible. It broke every known law of physics. Her team had kept it secret because they knew it would change everything. Now she walked into a government office and placed the plans on a desk. "We can cross the galaxy in days," she said. "Build the ships." In another lab, A man named had created weapons that could collapse stars. He had nightmares about what they could do. He had locked them away and tried to forget. Now he unlocked the vault and began mass production. Across Earth, similar scenes played out. Every secret, every hidden technology, every terrible creation that humanity had been too afraid to use came out of the shadows. In 3 months, humans built a military force that should have taken centuries. The alien races of the galaxy knew none of this. They saw only silence and assumed it meant surrender. In the halls of the Galactic Concord, diplomats discussed what to do with Earth. Some suggested absorbing human territory. Others wanted to offer protection in exchange for resources. The representative laughed and said humans would be good servants once they learned their place. They had no idea that the silence was not grief, it was focus. On the last day of the 3rd month, stood in a training facility with 10,000 other volunteers. She had been a schoolteacher before. Now she wore combat armor and carried weapons that could level buildings. Her eyes were empty of everything except purpose. Around her stood engineers who had become soldiers, doctors who had become field medics, artists who had become snipers. "You know why we are here," the instructor said. "You know what was taken from us. In 3 days we launch. There will be no retreat. There will be no surrender. There will be no mercy. We will show the galaxy what happens when you murder our children." 10,000 voices answered as one, "No mercy." Across the solar system, 2,000 warships powered up their engines. Each one was faster, stronger, and more deadly than anything the galaxy had ever seen. Each one carried crews who had lost someone on New Eden. Each one was painted with the names of the dead. The largest ship, the flagship of the new human fleet, was called the. It was named after a 7-year-old girl who had died holding a stuffed bear. On Earth, the final preparations were complete. The factories fell silent. The laboratories locked their doors. The time for building was over. The time for reckoning had begun. A single message was sent to every human across the solar system. It contained only 4 words. Remember New Eden, launch. And humanity went to war. The outpost at 7 was a military station at the edge of their territory. 200 warships guarded it, each one crewed by veterans who had fought in a dozen wars. The commander there had received word that humans might attempt some kind of foolish retaliation. He laughed when he heard this. His ships had crushed species far stronger than humans. This would be entertainment, nothing more. When human ships appeared on his sensors, the commander counted them carefully. 200 vessels, the same number as his own fleet. He smiled at the poetry of it. The humans had brought everything they had for one last desperate stand. He would destroy them and send their broken ships back to Earth as a warning. "All ships attack formation," he ordered. "Make it quick. I want to be home for dinner." The battle lasted 11 minutes. The commander never understood what happened. Human ships moved in ways that should have been impossible. They appeared and disappeared, jumping through space like ghosts. Their weapons cut through shields as if they did not exist. Plasma bolts that should have destroyed human vessels simply passed through empty space where the ships had been a moment before. One by one, the warships exploded. Crews that had won 100 battles died without ever landing a single hit. The commander watched his fleet vanish around him and felt something he had not felt in decades. Fear. His flagship was the last to fall. As the human weapons tore through his hull, his final sight was a human ship passing directly overhead. It was close enough that he could read the name painted on its side. Across the galaxy, every species watched the battle footage in stunned silence. This was impossible. Humans were weak. Humans were primitive. Humans did not have technology like this. They could not move like this. They could not fight like this. But they had, and they were just getting started. Over the next 2 weeks, humanity revealed capabilities that made the galaxy tremble. They showed warships that could cross entire sectors in hours. They showed weapons that could crack planets. They showed armies of soldiers modified and enhanced until they were barely human anymore, driven by cold fury and armed with tools of destruction beyond imagination. The Galactic Concord demanded an emergency meeting. Representatives from every species gathered to discuss what to do about the human threat. They demanded that the Conquered intervene, that they use their combined fleets to stop humanity before it was too late. The human ambassador arrived last. Her name was Elizabeth. She had been a professor of literature before the massacre. Her husband and 2 sons had died on New Eden. Now she wore the black uniform of the Terran sovereignty and spoke with a voice like ice. "You watched 12 million of our people burn," she said. "You did nothing. Some of you applauded. Now you ask us to show restraint." The representative stood up angrily. "This is an act of war against the conquered. You cannot." "Sit down," Elizabeth said. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. "You murdered our children and laughed about it. You wanted the galaxy to see what happens to the weak. Now the galaxy will see what happens to those who hurt our families." She placed a document on the table. It was a single page with simple words. "This is the doctrine of absolute response. It is now the law of humanity. For every human life taken by an enemy, we will take 100,000 lives in return. You killed 12 million of us. The math is simple. We will take 1.2 trillion lives before we consider peace." The room fell silent. Some representatives looked sick. Others looked terrified. The representative tried to speak, but no words came out. "The conquered has 2 choices," Elizabeth continued. "Stay out of our way or share their fate. We do not want war with you. We want war with them, but if you stand between us and justice, we will go through you, all of you, at once." She looked around the room slowly, meeting the eyes of every ambassador. "We hid our true strength because we hoped we would never need it. We chose peace because war is terrible and we knew that better than anyone. But you taught us that peace is not always possible. Some enemies only understand one thing." She turned to leave, then stopped at the door. "We will not stop. We cannot stop. It is not in our nature. Your ancestors learned to calculate acceptable losses, to retreat when the cost was too high, to surrender when defeat was certain. Ours did not. We learned to keep fighting until we won or died trying. Every species in this galaxy should remember that." The door closed behind her. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then, slowly, the representatives began to file out. The conquered would not help the. Everyone understood this now. It was not a matter of politics or alliances. It was simple survival. They were alone, and the humans were coming. Across the stars, the human fleet began its advance. 2,000 ships moving in perfect formation, painted with the names of 12 million dead, carrying crews who had nothing left to lose. The harvest was about to begin. The Dominion had ruled 47 worlds for over 10,000 years. Their empire stretched across 100 light years. Their population numbered in the hundreds of billions. They had conquered dozens of species and built monuments to their own greatness that touched the clouds. They believed they would rule forever. It took humanity 19 months to prove them wrong. The war was not a war. It was an execution. Human forces moved through space like death itself, patient and unstoppable. Every strategy they tried failed. Every defense they built crumbled. Every fleet they sent was destroyed. The first major world to fall was Prime, the industrial heart of the empire. 40 million worked in its factories, building the ships and weapons that had made their people feared. The human fleet arrived at dawn and broadcast a single message. "You have 12 hours to evacuate. Anyone who remains will be considered a military target." The commanders laughed. Evacuate 40 million people in 12 hours. Impossible. This was clearly a bluff. They ordered their people to stay at their posts and prepared for battle. Exactly 12 hours later, the human fleet opened fire. They did not stop until the entire planet was glass. Word spread quickly. The next world humanity approached evacuated within 6 hours. General Wei commanded the campaign from the bridge of the. She studied each battle with cold precision, looking for any advantage, any weakness. But there were no real battles anymore. They had lost the will to fight. Their ships fled at the first sight of human vessels. Their soldiers surrendered by the thousands. Their leaders begged for peace and received only silence. "We are not monsters," Wei told her officers. "We do not kill civilians who surrender. We do not torture prisoners. We are better than them. But we will not stop until their ability to threaten us is gone forever. Every ship, every weapon, every factory, every military base, everything that could ever be used against us must be destroyed." And so it was. One by one, the worlds fell, not through bloody conquest but through systematic destruction of everything military. Cities that surrendered were left intact but stripped of technology. Populations that cooperated were relocated to safe zones. Only those who fought were killed, and fewer fought with each passing month. The galaxy watched in horrified silence. This was not how wars were supposed to work. There was supposed to be negotiation, compromise, treaties that let both sides save face. But humans did not negotiate. They did not compromise. They simply advanced, day after day, world after world, until there was nothing left to take. Some species quietly began sending tribute to Earth. Others rushed to sign treaties of friendship. A few even offered to help with the invasion, hoping to earn favor with the new power in the galaxy. Humanity accepted their resources but declined their soldiers. This was personal. This was family business. Commander Al, the Butcher of New Eden, was found hiding on a colony world in the outer reaches of the Empire. He had grown thin and frightened, a shadow of the proud warrior who had laughed while children burned. Human soldiers dragged him before General Wei. "Do you remember what you said?" she asked him. "When you killed our people, you said it was the natural order. The strong take what they want. The weak suffer and die." Al trembled. "Please," he whispered. "I was following orders, I did not." "You laughed," Wei said softly. "While our children screamed, you laughed." She nodded to her soldiers. They took Al away. His trial lasted 3 hours. The evidence was the broadcast he himself had sent to the galaxy. He was found guilty of crimes against humanity and executed the following morning. Watched the execution from her ship. She felt nothing. She had expected satisfaction or peace or something, but there was only emptiness. Her daughter was still dead. Killing the man who ordered it did not bring her back. But there was still work to do. After 19 months, only one world remained. There, the ancient seat of their civilization, where their species had first looked up at the stars and dreamed of conquest. 4 billion huddled there, waiting for death. The human fleet surrounded the planet. Every ship trained its weapons on the surface. One command from General Wei would end the forever. The galaxy held its breath. Wei looked at the planet on her screen. 4 billion lives, civilians, children, people who had never held a weapon, who had only wanted to live their lives in peace, just like the people of New Eden. She thought about what humanity would become if she gave the order. She thought about the 12 million dead and the promise to avenge them. She thought about what it meant to be human. Then she opened a channel to the surface. "This is General Wei of the Terran Sovereignty. Your military is destroyed. Your empire is gone. Your ability to threaten us has been eliminated. The debt is not fully paid, but we are not like you. We will not slaughter 4 billion civilians to prove a point." She paused and let her words sink in. "But you will remember, your technology is being confiscated. Your capability is being destroyed. For the next 1,000 years you will remain on this world, unable to leave, watching the stars that you once ruled and remembering what you lost. This is your punishment, not death, memory." She ended the transmission and gave one final order. Establish the containment perimeter. The war is over. The war ended not with a final battle but with silence. The containment, as history would call it, became the defining moment of a new age. 4 billion lived on there, surrounded by human satellites that would shoot down any ship trying to leave. They were alive but trapped, able to see the stars they once ruled but never touch them again. Some in the galaxy called it cruel, others called it merciful, most simply called it a warning. Humanity did not seek to build an empire from the ashes of the. They had no interest in ruling other species or conquering distant worlds. What they wanted was simpler and more profound. They wanted to make sure no one would ever do to another species what they had done to them. Ambassador Elizabeth stood before the Galactic Concord 1 year after the war ended. The chamber that had once been filled with species who looked down on humanity was now filled with species who could not meet her eyes. "We did not want this," she said. "We wanted peace. We wanted to explore the stars and learn from your civilizations and share what we had discovered. You taught us that such dreams were foolish. You taught us that the weak are prey and the strong are hunters, so we became strong." She placed a new document on the table. "These are the new laws of the galaxy. They are not requests. They are not suggestions. They are the rules that will govern all spacefaring civilizations from this day forward." The laws were simple. Genocide would be punished with total war. Slavery would be punished with total war. The strong would not prey upon the weak without consequence. Any species that violated these rules would face the full power of humanity. "We are not your rulers," Elizabeth said. "We do not want tribute or worship or obedience. We want one thing only, for the innocent to be safe, for children on distant worlds to grow up without fear, for no mother to ever watch her daughter die while the galaxy does nothing." She looked around the room. "We will enforce these laws, not because we enjoy war. We hate it. We hate what we had to become to survive it. But we learned something important in our short time among the stars. Some evils cannot be stopped with words. Some monsters only understand force." The conquered accepted the new laws without debate. They had no choice. But in the years that followed, something unexpected happened. Species that had been conquered and enslaved for thousands of years found themselves suddenly free. They had not been the only predators in the galaxy. Many powerful civilizations had grown fat on the suffering of weaker ones. Now those civilizations faced a choice: free their victims or face humanity. Most chose to free their victims. Former slave species looked up at the stars for the first time in generations and saw possibility instead of fear. They sent messages of thanks to Earth. They asked how they could repay their liberators. Humanity's answer was always the same: when you are strong, protect those who are weak, pay it forward, that is all we ask. A new galactic concord formed, built on principles humanity had written in the ashes of the old order. For the first time in galactic history, there were real consequences for cruelty, real protections for the vulnerable, real justice for the victims. Not everyone was happy. Some species resented humanity's power. Some whispered that humans were tyrants hiding behind noble words. Some plotted rebellion and revenge. They never acted on their plots. The memory of them was too fresh. The fear was too deep. On Earth, life slowly returned to normal. Soldiers became farmers again. Scientists returned to peaceful research. The factories that had built weapons began building homes and schools. Humanity tried to remember who they had been before the war. But they did not forget. Retired from the military and became a teacher again. She taught history now, making sure every child understood what had happened and why. On her desk sat a small stuffed bear, worn with age, that she had recovered from the ruins of New Eden. "My daughter gave this to me before she left for the colony," she would tell her students. "She said it would protect me until she came back. She never came back, but I keep it to remember why we fight, not for glory, not for power, for the people we love." General Wei became a symbol of humanity's transformation. She was not celebrated as a conqueror but as a protector. Schools were named after her. Statues showed her not raising a weapon but extending a hand to help. She gave speeches about the cost of war and the importance of peace. "We proved we could destroy," she said in her most famous address. "Now we must prove we can build. We showed the galaxy our wrath. Now we must show them our hearts." On the site where New Eden once stood, humanity built a memorial. It was a simple black obelisk, taller than any building, visible from space. On its surface were carved 12 million names, every person who had died in the massacre. At the base, in every language known to the galaxy, was a single message. They were loved, they are remembered, they are avenged. Visitors came from across the stars to see it. Species that had never cared about humans before made pilgrimages to stand in the shadow of that black stone and understand what had changed the galaxy forever. And when they looked at humanity now, they felt something new, not the dismissal of the past, not the pity of the strong for the weak, something older and deeper that every species understood in their bones. Fear, respect, and perhaps, just perhaps, a small amount of hope. Because if humanity could survive the worst the galaxy had to offer, if they could turn their darkest hour into a new dawn, then maybe there was hope for everyone. The stars were quieter now, safer. Children on 1,000 worlds slept peacefully because somewhere out there humans were watching, protecting, remembering. It was not the future humanity had dreamed of when they first reached for the stars, but it was the future they had earned. And they would defend it forever.